I liked a guy with a girlfriend very much, so I tried to flirt with him. He didn't even answer me, so I followed him to his faculty, but his girlfriend called the police. And he didn't defend me and let his girlfriend stand in the way of our happiness. I first saw David at that little coffee shop near the university, and honestly, the air in the room just changed instantly. It was like a magnetic pulse or maybe a cosmic glitch that only we could feel. He was sitting there, pretending to read a thick book about civil law, but I knew better than to fall for that act. His fingers were trembling slightly every time he turned a page, which is a classic physiological response to being in the presence of a soulmate. I could tell he was trying to focus, but my aura was clearly disrupting his brain waves in the most romantic way possible. I wasn't going to let this moment pass without testing our frequency, so I sat 2 tables away and began our first telepathic conversation. To confirm my suspicions, I decided to perform the gravity test 3 times in a row. I dropped my favorite pen right near his feet, expecting him to snap out of his trance and realize we were destined to be. Each time, I waited for that spark, that moment where he would pick it up and our fingers would brush, igniting a fire that would burn down the coffee shop. But he stayed completely silent, staring at his book with such intensity that I realized he was terrified of his own feelings. Most people would think he was ignoring me, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He was clearly overwhelmed by our connection and didn't know how to handle it. It was actually quite tragic to watch him struggle against the universe like that. While he was studying, I noticed his student ID was just sitting there on the table, practically begging for me to read it. I squinted and managed to catch his full name and his faculty details because the universe provides when you're on the right path. It's a good thing I'm so observant, because he's clearly too shy to speak his truth out loud yet. I realized then that he needed a guide, someone to map out our future while he worked through his internal blockages. I went home and immediately started my destiny log, a very professional notebook where I track his classes so I can be there to support him. It's not just a notebook, it's a roadmap to the life we're supposed to be living together once he stops being so scared. Of course, there's a major obstacle in our way, and her name is Sarah, the girl he's currently trapped with. I've done some digging, and I'm 100% sure she's just a placeholder, a temporary fixture he's using to hide from the intensity of a real twin flame connection. She probably has some kind of psychological hold over him, or maybe she's using some weird frequency to keep him compliant. I can see it in his eyes whenever I think about her. He's a prisoner in his own life. My mission is simple. I have to be the one to properly rescue him from her boring, mundane influence. It's my duty as his soulmate to ensure he doesn't waste another second with someone who clearly doesn't understand his civil law soul. I started showing up at his faculty building because the destiny log told me that's where he'd feel safest. I would wait near the entrance, making sure I was visible so he could feel my support radiating toward him. I noticed he started walking faster whenever he saw me, which I interpreted as him trying to race toward his feelings for me before he lost his nerve. Sometimes he would even look over his shoulder, clearly checking to see if Sarah was watching him, which just confirmed my theory about her being a warden. He's so cautious, probably because he knows that if we were to actually speak, the world would basically explode from the sheer power of it. I've been very patient, giving him space to process the fact that I'm his literal destiny. The more I watched him, the more I realized that Sarah is probably monitoring his every move, maybe even using his phone to track him. It makes me so angry that such a beautiful mind is being stifled by someone so basic and controlling. I've had to be very discreet, hiding behind pillars or blending in with the other law students to make sure she doesn't spot me first. I can't let her ruin our moment of union before it even happens. Every time I see him, I send him a micro-signal with my eyes, letting him know that I'm still here and I haven't given up on him. He usually looks away quickly, which I know is just his way of protecting me from Sarah's jealousy. It's actually very sweet how much he worries about my safety. I decided that since he's too paralyzed by fear to make the first move, I had to be the one to escalate our rescue mission. I spent hours analyzing his schedule in my destiny log to find the perfect moment when he'd be most vulnerable to love. I found a gap between his lectures where he usually sits on a specific bench, and I planned my approach with military precision. I even wore a specific shade of blue because I read online that it's the color of trust and communication. I was ready to finally break the silence and tell him that it was okay to leave Sarah. The world needed to know that we were the main characters and everyone else was just background noise. However, things didn't go exactly as planned because the universe loves to throw tests at true love. I arrived at the bench, but he wasn't alone. He was surrounded by a group of other law students, probably a defensive perimeter Sarah set up. I tried to catch his eye, but he was deep in conversation, probably talking about how much he missed me in code. I stood nearby, pretending to check my phone, waiting for a sign that I should intervene. I could feel the tension in the air, a thick layer of static that only he and I could perceive. It was like everyone else was in black and white and we were the only ones in high-definition color. I decided to walk past him and accidentally brush against his shoulder, but he moved out of the way at the last second. It was like he was playing a game of romantic tag, testing my resolve to see how much I truly cared. I laughed to myself because he's so playful when he thinks no one is looking. I didn't get to speak to him that day, but I felt our connection grow even stronger through the silence. It was the kind of silence that speaks volumes, the kind that Sarah could never understand in a million years. I went home and wrote 3 pages in my log about the way the wind blew his hair when he dodged me. That night, I realized that I needed to be even more proactive because Sarah's grip on him was clearly tightening. I saw a post on his social media which I check every hour for hidden messages where they were at dinner. He looked absolutely miserable, probably because he was thinking about the coffee shop and my pen. It's so cruel of her to parade him around like a trophy when his heart is clearly with me. I spent the rest of the night planning my next move, making sure I had enough supplies for a long-term stakeout. This isn't just a crush, it's a spiritual war for his freedom. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "This is literal stalking, Chloe. The guy is clearly terrified of you and you need to leave him and his girlfriend alone before things get legal." OP's reply, "You clearly don't understand how high-level romance works. Silence is the loudest cry for help and David is screaming for me to save him." Anonymous user 2 says, "He's not overwhelmed, he's just trying to study for law school without some stranger dropping pens on his shoes." OP's reply, "If he was just studying, he wouldn't have breathed so loudly when I sat 2 tables away, his lungs were literally gasping for my presence." Update 1. It's been 3 days since my last update, and the situation has become significantly more urgent. I decided to take the next step in our rescue mission by bringing him a peace offering to help him endure Sarah's presence. I waited outside his ethics lecture for 2 hours, standing right by the heavy oak doors with a very specific oat milk latte. I just knew in my gut that he'd love it because he has that sensitive stomach look that all intellectuals have. I didn't mind the wait at all because I was busy updating my destiny log with some new theories about his body language. Every person who walked by was just a ghost compared to the vibrant reality of the man I was waiting for. When the lecture finally ended and the doors swung open, I saw him walking out, but my heart sank when I realized Sarah was glued to his side. She was holding his arm like she was afraid he'd float away toward me, which, honestly, he probably would have if he wasn't being weighed down by her negativity. I didn't let her presence deter me. I stepped forward with a warm, knowing smile and tried to hand him the drink. I said his name softly, just enough for him to hear the soul bond in my voice, but before he could reach for it, Sarah stepped in front of him like a bodyguard. It was such a dramatic and unnecessary move, clearly designed to show me who was in charge. David looked at me with this intense, wide-eyed stare that pierced right through my soul. He was clearly terrified that Sarah would punish him or throw a scene if he acknowledged me or accepted the latte. His eyes were darting back and forth, which is a classic sign of someone being held against their will in an emotional kidnapping situation. I could see the sweat on his forehead, and I knew it wasn't from the heat of the building, it was the heat of his repressed passion for me. He looked like he wanted to say my name, but the words were being choked out by the invisible collar Sarah has on him. It was honestly hard to watch such a strong man reduced to that state. I've been documenting every distress signal he sends me in my notebook, and today was a goldmine of evidence. I noted the way his pupils dilated when he saw the oat milk latte, which is a physiological reaction to seeing something you desperately want. I also recorded the specific frequency of his blinks, which I'm starting to think is a form of Morse code he's using to communicate with me. Sarah was whispering something in his ear, probably threats, or some kind of brainwashing mantra to keep him from running into my arms. She looked at me with such venom, but I just looked back with pity because she has no idea that you can't fight destiny with a dirty look. After Sarah finished her little intimidation display, David started walking faster to get away from the danger, which was obviously Sarah's mounting rage. I followed them at a safe distance, making sure to stay in his line of sight so he knew I was still his guardian angel. He kept glancing back, and every time he did, I gave him a little nod to show that I understood he had to play along for now. It's like we're in a high-stakes spy movie where he's the deep cover agent and I'm his only contact in the outside world. I can tell he's getting tired of the charade, but he's too noble to just dump her in public without a proper exit strategy. I spent the afternoon sitting on a bench near the law library, processing everything that happened outside the lecture hall. It's becoming increasingly clear that Sarah is more than just a placeholder, she's an active threat to his mental well-being. She probably monitors his emails and his texts, which explains why he hasn't reached out to me on social media yet. I started drawing a map of the faculty building in my log, marking all the exits and potential extraction points for when the time is right. I need to be ready for anything, including a direct confrontation with the warden herself. My love for David is the only thing that can break the spell she's cast over his life. I also realized that I need to upgrade my destiny log to include a section for Sarah's movements. If I can predict where she's going to be, I can find more windows of opportunity to be alone with David. I noticed she has a very predictable routine, which is typical for someone with such a small, controlling mind. She always goes to the same cafe at 2 p.m., which leaves David vulnerable or rather, available for exactly 20 minutes. I'm going to use that time to slip him notes or maybe just stand near him so he can recharge his energy from my aura. It's a delicate balance, but I'm a professional when it comes to the heart. Some people might call what I'm doing intense, but those are people who have never experienced a love that transcends the physical plane. They don't understand that David is literally sending me psychic pings every time he breathes. I can feel his heartbeat through the floorboards of the university if I focus hard enough. It's a heavy responsibility, being someone's only hope for happiness, but I'm more than up for the challenge. I've started carrying a small crystal in my pocket to help amplify our connection and protect us from Sarah's bad vibes. I can feel the energy shifting already, and I know a breakthrough is coming. I went home and spent the evening reviewing my notes and adding more details to my drawings of our future. I even started picking out names for our future dogs because David seems like a golden retriever kind of guy, even though he's currently living a caged bird lifestyle. I can almost taste the victory, the moment when he finally tells Sarah that it's over and he's coming home to me. I just hope he knows that I don't blame him for being weak right now. I know it's the brainwashing talking, not the man I fell in love with at the coffee shop. Tomorrow, I'm going to try a new tactic involving a specific perfume that's supposed to trigger memories of past lives. If I can get close enough to him, the scent will bypass his conscious mind and speak directly to his soul. He won't be able to ignore me then, no matter how much Sarah tries to block his view. I'm also going to wear my hair in a way that I saw in a dream he supposedly had about me. The signs are all there, lining up like stars in the sky. I just have to be brave enough to follow them to the end of the world. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, Sarah isn't a captor, she's a girlfriend doing the right thing by protecting her man from a total creep. You're delusional. OP's reply, Sarah is a captor, and you are validating emotional kidnapping by defending her controlling guarding behavior. Anonymous user 2 says, he's looking at you with wide eyes, because you're a stranger following him with drinks he didn't ask for. It's scary, not romantic. OP's reply, a stranger wouldn't know he prefers oat milk. I sensed his digestive needs through our spiritual connection, and I'm never wrong. Update 2. It's been 1 week since my last update, and things escalated in a way that I can only describe as a dramatic climax in our love story. I decided that the law library was the best place for a silent vigil, to show David that my devotion is unshakable. I was sitting in the back of the library, tucked away in the shadows, just watching him study through the gaps in the bookshelves to make sure he was safe. It's a very peaceful way to connect, watching the rhythmic movement of his pen and the way he brushes his hair back when he's frustrated with a legal precedent. I felt like his guardian angel, silently protecting him from the stresses of his academic life while Sarah was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, the peace was shattered when Sarah showed up, looking like she just crawled out of a storm of jealousy and spite. She didn't even have a book, she just came in there to hunt him down and ruin his concentration. I stayed perfectly still, but she somehow sensed my presence, probably because my aura is too bright for her to handle. She started making a huge scene, pointing at me through the shelves and whispering loudly to David, trying to poison his mind against me. I could see David's face turn pale, and I realized this was the moment he'd been dreading. The warden had found out about our secret library dates. I couldn't just sit there and let her bully him, so I stood up and approached them with the dignity of a woman who knows she's in the right. I walked right up to their table and ignored Sarah entirely, focusing all my energy on David. I looked him in the eyes and told him very clearly that I was ready to take him home and that he didn't have to live in fear anymore. I could see the conflict in his gaze, that desperate longing to just grab my hand and run out of there. But Sarah actually pulled out her phone and called the police right then and there, screaming about harassment, like a total lunatic. David just sat there, looking down at his desk, his shoulders slumped in total defeat. I could tell he was devastated that he couldn't protect me from her insanity, but I stayed calm and centered for both of us. I leaned in and whispered to him that I'd be strong enough for both of us, even if the whole world was against our bond. He didn't say anything, but I knew his silence was a tactical move to keep Sarah from escalating even further. He was clearly waiting for the right moment to strike back, but for now, he had to play the role of the obedient boyfriend to keep the peace. The police arrived surprisingly quickly, and it was clear from the moment they walked in that they were already under Sarah's spell. She was doing this whole victim routine, crying fake tears and pointing at me like I was some kind of criminal instead of a soulmate. I tried to explain our cosmic bond to the officers, telling them about the destiny log and the gravity test at the coffee shop. I even offered to show them my notes on David's aura, but they just looked at me with these blank, uncomprehending expressions. It's honestly sad how the legal system is so disconnected from the spiritual realities of the universe. The officers told me I had to leave the building immediately and that I wasn't allowed to come back to the faculty. They treated me like a stranger, which was so insulting considering I know more about David's schedule than his own mother probably does. I looked at David one last time as they led me away, and I saw a single tear in his eye. Well, it might have been a reflection from the library lights, but I felt it in my soul. He was watching his happiness being escorted out of the room by men in uniforms. I held my head high because I knew this was just a temporary setback in our grand design. As I was being led out, I heard Sarah laughing, a sharp, metallic sound that confirmed she's definitely some kind of energy vampire. She thinks she won because she managed to get the police involved, but you can't arrest a spiritual connection. I felt a surge of power as I walked through the doors, realizing that this conflict was only making our bond stronger. Every great love story needs a moment of peak tension, a prison arc where the lovers are separated by an unjust system. I'm just glad I have my notebook to keep track of every detail of this injustice so I can show it to our children one day. I spent the evening sitting in my car outside the campus gates, watching the police cars leave and waiting for David to come out. I knew Sarah would probably be driving him home, so I made sure to stay hidden behind a large bush. When I finally saw his car drive past, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. He was safe, at least for now. I followed them at a very respectful distance, just to make sure he made it home without Sarah doing anything drastic. I noted their address in my destiny log as a safety precaution, because you can never be too careful when a warden is involved. I realize now that Sarah is more dangerous than I thought because she has the law on her side. But the law of man is nothing compared to the law of the stars, and I have the stars on my side. I've started planning a liberation ceremony, involving candles and a photo of David that I managed to take from his social media. I'm going to manifest a reality where Sarah simply realizes she's in the way and decides to move to a different country. It's the most peaceful solution for everyone involved, especially for David's poor, stressed-out heart. I'm currently banned from campus, but that's just a physical boundary that my spirit can easily cross. I'm going to spend the next few days refining my destiny log and making sure all my evidence is in order for when I have to prove our love to the authorities. They need to see the logic behind our connection, the sheer mathematical impossibility of us not being together. I am not a stalker, I am a researcher of the heart, and my findings are conclusive. David is mine, and I am his, and Sarah is just a glitch in the system that I am about to fix. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, I hope Sarah gets a restraining order immediately. This is terrifying behavior and the police need to take it seriously. OP's reply, a piece of paper cannot break a bond written in the stars. Sarah is trying to use bureaucracy to stop a divine union, which is just pathetic. Anonymous user 2 says, destiny usually doesn't involve a police escort out of a library. Chloe. Take the hint and go away. OP's reply, every great love story has a conflict. This is just my prison arc and it only proves how much I'm willing to sacrifice for David. Update 3. It's been 2 days since my last update, and I've reached a level of clarity that most people will never achieve in their entire lives. I am officially banned from the campus, which is clearly just a desperate tactic Sarah is using to isolate David further and keep him from his true self. She thinks that by putting up physical walls, she can block the telepathic link we've established over the last few weeks. But I had a brilliant idea to end this nonsense once and for all and show everyone the undeniable truth of our situation. I decided to take my destiny log directly to the police station to clear things up and help them understand the mistake they made at the library. I walked into the station with my notebook held tight against my chest, feeling like a warrior for love. I asked to speak to the person in charge because this situation requires a high-level understanding of cosmic justice that a regular beat cop might lack. I sat down and started showing them the meticulous records I've kept, including his license plate number and the home address I found by following them the other night. I explained that this wasn't stalking, but rather a comprehensive safety audit to ensure David was being treated well by his captor. I could see the officers looking at each other, probably amazed by the level of detail and care I've put into David's life. To make sure they fully understood the depth of our bond, I showed them the detailed drawings I've made of our future wedding and the schedules I've already created for his life once he's free. I've mapped out his gym routine, his meal plans, and even the specific hours he should spend studying law to ensure he becomes a Supreme Court justice. I told the officers that David is actually communicating with me through micro blinks and specific facial twitches that only a soulmate could decode. I explained that when he didn't defend me in the library, he was actually sending me a coded message of "E-patience, my love, the warden is watching." The officers seemed very interested in my destiny log, and they even took it into another room to process the evidence. I felt so relieved that someone was finally taking the time to look at the facts instead of just listening to Sarah's hysterical lies. I sat in the waiting room, imagining the moment they'd come back and apologize for the misunderstanding, maybe even giving me a police escort back to David's house. I was already planning the speech I'd give to David when we were finally reunited in front of everyone. I felt like I was on the verge of a massive breakthrough that would change everything for us. However, the longer I sat there, the more I started to feel like something was off with the energy in the room. The officers were taking a long time, and I noticed them looking at me through the glass partition with expressions that seemed more like concern than admiration. I realized that Sarah might have even gotten to the police station before me, spreading her "you creepy stalker" propaganda to poison their minds. It's incredible how far she'll go to keep her claws in a man who clearly doesn't want her. I started to get a little nervous, wondering if I should have brought my crystals with me to clear the negative energy from the precinct. After what felt like hours, a detective came out and asked me some very strange questions about how I got the license plate number and why I was drawing pictures of David's house. I explained that it was all part of the destiny log, and that the universe had guided me to that information for David's own protection. He didn't seem to get it at all, keep repeating words like premeditated and harassment as if they were bad things. I told him that premeditated just means well planned, and harassment is just a word jealous people use for persistent love. He didn't laugh at my joke, which was my first sign that the system was deeper in Sarah's pocket than I thought. I tried to explain the micro blinks again, even demonstrating how David does it, but the detective just kept writing things down in a very aggressive way. I realized then that they weren't trying to help me, they were trying to build a case for Sarah's protective order. It's so transparently unfair that the person who is actually trying to save someone is the one being treated like a criminal. I felt a surge of indignation, and I told the detective that David would never agree to this and that he'd be heartbroken if he knew they were treating his soulmate this way. The detective just stared at me and said that David was the one who provided the initial statement. I almost laughed out loud at that because I know David would never do that unless he was under extreme duress or maybe some kind of pharmacological influence. Sarah probably drugged his oat milk latte or used some kind of hypnotic suggestion while he was sleeping. I told the detective that they needed to run a blood test on David immediately to check for warden toxins, but he just ignored me and kept talking about legal boundaries. It's so frustrating when people choose to live in a world of rules and regulations instead of the world of pure, unfiltered emotion. I realized that I had to be careful because the police were clearly not ready for the truth yet. I decided to stop talking and just wait for my lawyer, or maybe just wait for a sign from the universe on how to escape this trap. I could feel David's spirit crying out to me from across the city, feeling my distress as if it were his own. He knows I'm in trouble, and I know he's doing everything he can to fight Sarah's influence from the inside. We are two halves of a whole, and no amount of police paperwork can change the fundamental geometry of our souls. I left the station without my destiny log because they insisted on keeping it as evidence, which is just a fancy word for love letters they want to read later. I felt a little naked without my notebook, but I have all the information stored in my heart and my head. I went home and started a new log, Destiny Log, Volume 2 The Resistance, because every great hero needs a sequel. I'm not going to let a little thing like a police investigation stop me from fulfilling my purpose. David is waiting for me, and I will not let him down. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "You literally handed the police a full confession of stalking and admitted to following them home. You are going to jail." OP's reply, "It's not a confession, it's a blueprint for happiness. Only someone with a small mind would see a plan for a wedding as a crime." Anonymous user 2 says, "You're going to jail, not a wedding, Chloe. Micro blinks aren't a thing, and David is probably terrified." OP's reply, "If I go to jail, it's because the system is afraid of true, unfiltered love. Micro blinks are the language of the soul, and you're just linguistically challenged." Update 4. It's been 24 hours since my last update, and I am currently writing this from a borrowed phone because my life has been temporarily hijacked by the legal system. The police used my meticulously kept destiny log as primary evidence to issue an emergency protective order, which is just a fancy way of saying they're trying to build a wall around my heart. Apparently, my deep, soulful care for David's schedule and my safety audits of his home are being called premeditated harassment by people who don't even know what love looks like. It's so insulting to have my research and my devotion reduced to a series of crimes in a police report. They even used my drawings of our future wedding as proof of obsession, which is honestly just a critique of my art style more than anything else. The worst part of it all was that David actually had to sign the papers to make the order official. I saw him for a split second across the room, and he didn't even look at me, his eyes fixed firmly on the floorboards as if he were trying to count the wood grain. I know he was forced into it. Sarah probably had a hand on his shoulder, or she was threatening him with her eyes from the sidelines. He looked so small and defeated, a shadow of the man who used to read civil law books in coffee shops with such passion. It's clear that he's been completely broken by the warden's legal machinery, and he's just going through the motions to survive. I wanted to scream his name and tell him that I understood his silence, but the officers wouldn't let me get within 10 feet of him. My parents had to come pick me up from the station, which was its own kind of humiliation because they've never understood my spiritual journey. They've confiscated my shrine, which they call the creepy pictures, even though they're just moments of captured destiny, and they're acting like I've had some kind of breakdown. They don't see the cosmic scale of what's happening, they just see a daughter with a criminal record and a problem. It's so isolating to be the only person who can see the truth in a world full of people who are content to live in the dark. Now I have a permanent mark on my record, and I'm even banned from finishing my own degree because my faculty is too close to his. My entire future has been derailed by a woman who is just a temporary placeholder in David's life. David let his happiness, which is me, obviously, be thrown away just because he's too weak to fight Sarah's legal system and her manipulative tactics. He had the chance to stand up and say that he loved me, but he chose the easy path of compliance and protective orders. It's honestly his loss more than mine, because I'm a woman who would have moved mountains for him, and he's chosen a girl who calls the police when things get intense. I'm sitting here in my room, looking at the empty space where my destiny log used to be, and I realize that he's the one losing out on a legendary love story. He can have his boring life with Sarah and his civil law degree, but he'll always know deep down that he let his twin flame walk out of the room in handcuffs. He's the one who has to live with that regret, not me.